Welcome to MEDIMAGZA The Podcast. Today we have a very important show for you all, of course. A hashtag claim your status. A year-long journey into the realities, impact and solutions for gender-based violence in South Africa. Now, I'm your host, as you know, Clive Maestri, Editor-in-Chief for MEDIMAGZA. We're joined by a very, very special contributor, Dr. Yassine Bismillah, forensic pathologist and GBV advocate. Together, we'll uncover the hidden wounds of GBV, hear from survivors and experts, and of course, shine the light on a path of hope, healing, and justice. In a country where around 15 women lose their lives to GBV every day, and femicide rates are amongst the highest in the world, silence is definitely not an option. Whether you're a healthcare professional, survivor, ally, or member of our broader community, let's take action. Each episode will tackle a tough question, share real-life stories, and offer practical resources to help end GBV and restore dignity and safety to all. Let's begin. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bismillah.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor.
Let's get into it. When we talk about gender-based violence, it's easy to imagine physical injuries, but so much of harm is hidden. Emotional scars, anxiety, changes in behavior. These wounds go unnoticed for years, even by those closest to the survivor. In your experience, why does GBV often remain invisible? And what warning signs should families, friends, and healthcare professionals never ignore?
All right. So 100%. I love how you've framed that. We hear GBV so much. We hear gender-based violence so much. We hear, see, do autopsies on femicide so much. And people always, I think they sometimes imagine this very dramatic presentation of a beaten, battered, female presenting person, for example. But that is rarely the case. These wounds are usually hidden. The signs are very subtle, and it takes a trained eye and a trained medical expertise to just pick up on the slight oohs and the ahs that can point to interpersonal violence, gender-based violence, and of course, then the end stage of femicide. So I worked at a rape center for a few years. It is a Tutuzela crisis center, and I got to deal firsthand with women coming forward with issues. When we say wounds are hidden, I think you hit the nail on the spot when you spoke of emotional abuse. You can speak of financial abuse, you can speak of societal abuse. As healthcare workers, we need to have that extra edge. We need to build a rapport with our patients first. We need to ask sometimes difficult questions. We need to ask, do you feel safe at home? We need to ask, go into a family history, go into a relationship, interpersonal history for 1 second. You might pick up something very subtle, something very small, something very that's going on. So a pattern to look for as a healthcare professional or any first responder to a setting like this. It could be a social worker, it could be a chiropractor, it could be a teacher, right? Children talk, right? When you see injuries or don't see injuries or hear a history that is inconsistent with what you're seeing, that is a first telltale sign, especially in our women, especially in our vulnerable communities and societies.
That's really, really interesting and so true. For many survivors, speaking up about abuse isn't just difficult, it can feel dangerous and even impossible. Fear of not being believed, worries about retaliation, and the stigma attached to GBV all play a role. What do you see as the biggest barriers that keep survivors silent? And how can we, as a society, create truly safe spaces for disclosure and support?
It is so difficult. It is so difficult. I don't know how many people who have come up to you and were like, I'm a survivor of trauma, I'm a survivor of abuse, I'm a survivor of gender-based violence. It is so rare. In my practice, I don't think I've had a patient ever come up and verbally say that. There's a crazy stigma around gender-based violence, around violence against women, just against injustices against women. We come from a very culturally diverse country, lots of traditions, societal beliefs, cultural beliefs. The clinic I worked in was a very conservative area, a very conservative clinic. Almost to even, as a male, to even examine a female patient was taboo. We don't speak of STIs, for example. We don't speak of specific diseases or things because of the stigma attached to it. There is almost a patriarchal society that we live in. It is a cultural patriarchal society, and that again puts women at a slight or at a huge disadvantage to actually speak up. There's victim shaming, victim blaming. I've heard people say, but you go back to that same person, you go back to that person. It creates a very uncomfortable environment, almost a hostile environment for women to speak up. When looking at solutions for that, I think from the medical field is, again, creating safe spaces is difficult. Hey, it's very difficult. Women find it very difficult to speak up. Churches, mosques, they are male driven. Women don't have enough platforms to actually speak, and to create that from a community takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of destigmatization. I've seen a lot of men, for example, being in higher positions in communities, so already systematically extremely difficult. So I think it's those barriers that I've seen the most, where it's almost impossible to speak about. And again, a tip is for just a little bit of advice, a little bit of rapport every now and then in your consultations.
Yeah. Our barriers definitely, sadly, still exist, and it's not always a safe space to talk about such. The impact of
It
GBV
isn't at
reaches
all.
far beyond the immediate trauma. Survivors often face ongoing health challenges, chronic pain, anxiety, even depression, and even long-term physical conditions. From your perspective, how does GBV affect someone physically and mentally, both in the short term and across their lifetime?
So let's start physically. Usually there will be bruises or injuries in hidden places. So this would be around the neck, around the torso, around the thighs. These are usually places, for example, if someone comes with presenting with a flu, for example, you would not examine. So be very aware of that. A. B, be very aware of inconsistent accidental injuries that come up recurringly with an abnormal history. So, especially in our vulnerable communities like women or children, when they come with accidents that do not make sense, but they were here last week for an accident as well, something is happening. Be very mindful of the family dynamic that comes to your practice or to your environment. I've had instances where husband or the male figure speaks over the female speaker. Again, that should be your forensic mind, your medical mind, your first red flag that comes up. I've had situations where a mother will speak for the child, and you can tell things are not 100% correct. Um, Generalized body pains or non-specific presentations. So if you literally someone comes in with generalized body pain, headaches for a week, but is completely healthy, again, another red flag, unwanted pregnancies, recurring STIs. So all of these are telltale signs, not always, but you need to keep an eye out of those. And you can be very subtle in how you approach that. I had a situation where I sent the husband out to get a blood test, which he did not need. And I could have a one-on-one with the patient and actually just get a bit more of engagement. And remember, the law protects you as a medical worker in any field. If you report something to the police in good faith, you cannot be held criminally liable for that. You could be held criminally liable for ignoring those things. So if you are not sure, make a note of it. It is legal, it is there. You never know when someone will come back for something.
That's so, so important. And I love that you mentioned that because I feel in this day and age, sometimes, we tend to overlook things. And
Mm,
I think by
mm.
making notes, it's so important for this recollection to piece through a puzzle. Speaking of the role of men, we can't talk about ending GBV without involving men and boys as active allies. Challenging harmful stereotypes and changing the culture takes real commitment. What are the most effective ways for men to support this movement? And how can they help shift attitudes in their own communities?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think as men ourselves, I think sometimes we do feel marginalized when another gender is brought forward, So there is this feeling of discord, there is a feeling of blame at times as well. Our men, our young boys, our children, they are the future. We're not saying men are the problem, but damn it, are men the solution? They are a huge part of the solution. Should they be excluded from this conversation? Hell no. They should be almost prioritized in being educated and being understanding of what is happening in the country. And I think from what I've experienced is there is a huge blockade when it comes to GBV or sensitive issues. Men are the patriarchs of the house. They should not be told what to do by a medical practitioner or a healthcare worker or a friend or anything of that. But what we do have is our supportive men, our allies,
Mm,
those husbands or partners of women they love truly and care for truly, who understand the concept of woman as a mother, as a daughter, as a grandchild. That person will think twice before pulling a trigger, before lifting a hand against another woman under any circumstances. Those men exist. They are our allies. They are the people who should be starting or even just mentioning the conversation. Those are the men who we need to be talking to their other friends and saying, that's not so funny, or that's not so okay. When someone
yeah,
says all men cheat, not all men cheat. I don't. Or all men are trash. They're not. I really, it's that starting point which I think is very important. Everything after
yeah.
that is extremely complex, but those I think is our target audience. And with a movement like this, we don't want to pinpoint and blame.
Yeah.
We want to empower positivity from the other side, from our side as well.
I really do believe as well, like you say, I think hashtag claim your status is really going to change the narrative in conversations, in groups,
Yes,
amongst the male
yes,
population as well. So it's so important.
yes,
Let's move on to
yes,
trauma and recovery. Like with most things,
yeah,
some days are better than others, as you know, and healing takes time.
yeah,
Support systems, whether
yeah,
formal or informal, play a massive role in that
yeah,
journey. What does the path to healing
yeah.
look like, and what kind of support have you seen in the biggest difference for these survivors?
So this is extremely difficult. Working in that rape crisis center, I picked up a trend of isolation. These women are often very isolated. They come from conservative communities, cultures, religions. There is not a lot of even female support for their peers, for example. And the horrifying reality is that they are stigmatized for speaking up. So that already now we create a bubble of isolation. Where do we start? How do we start? There's hotlines available. Our stats are getting higher. We've seen GBV on billboards, we've seen it on TV, we've seen it on checkers packets literally for years. Why does it take such a issue now to create a national crisis when it has been happening and has been spoken of? So I'll be honest, from what I've experienced, there aren't a lot of survivor-orientated community groups. So when I look at church groups, it's church-orientated. When I look at mosque groups, they are religiously orientated. Again, marginalizing. So what I feel, which is very similar for the male narrative, is to check in on your best friend. Have a friend pick up the signs of depression, pick up the signs of an unhealthy, toxic relationship.
Yeah.
Already, you know that there's an imbalance of equality, and you know there is a vulnerable human being there.
Yeah.
Keep your eye out, look out. For survivors, it is extremely difficult, it is re traumatizing, it is living every aspect of that emotional abuse again. But for those survivors, one advice that I can give you as a medical healthcare worker and as a specialist in the field of female deaths, tell someone, be it a friend, be it a brother, be it a sibling, be it a parent, tell someone. It will not just lighten the burden. You might be very surprised what that person might do.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then speaking about, being alienated or feeling alone, often that spills into your work life, goes into the workplace,
Yeah,
and now it impacts your
yeah.
performance, your safety, your well-being. Employers have a responsibility too, I feel, to create a very supportive environment. How does GBV show up in professional settings, though? And what practical steps can employers take to help survivors and foster safer workplaces?
100%. So these are small things which make a huge impact. We know the stats, we know the issues of gender-based violence. Speaking to women, working with women or survivors, I have realized that they do not feel safe. They do not even feel safe in a taxi, in an Uber. They don't feel safe to even walk alone outside their homes. So you can imagine how perhaps a male-dominated workplace or a mixed workplace or an unequal, which will benefit one gender against another, can be a huge concern and contribute heavily to gender-based violence. So small tips and advice I can give. Firstly, create a safe space for women in your workplace. This could be separating the men from the women, having a male office, having a female office. Not always possible, but I think that's the first step is to foster a safe physical area.
Yeah.
Now, to work on the psyche, to work on the understanding, to work on the education, I implore you to have some kind of check in. How are you doing on your agenda of every meeting? It it sounds good on paper, but you never know who might speak out when, about what, or get a whiff of something versus something else. We know the red flags now. We have a bit more of understanding of what is happening to women in our country.
Mm.
That asking, how are you? That being on the agenda standardly. I would love to say, let's have a women's group in every workplace. That is not feasible in our country. We have multitudes of workplaces with different socioeconomic circumstances. But a mental check-in is, again, a first step to speaking about interpersonal issues.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's so important, especially. I think the biggest thing is when you think you feel alone or you're the only one going through it, and you may say something that creates a
Yeah,
conversation, and you go,
yeah,
"Oh,
yeah,
I've also known someone," or "I'm going through it myself." I'm so glad you opened the floor for conversation. Let's talk about the vulnerable groups now, including children and those
yeah,
with disabilities, and even those with chronic illness
yeah,
face unique risks and
yeah.
barriers when it comes to GBV. Their voices are often overlooked, in mainstream conversations. How does GBV impact these vulnerable population groups, and what targeted interventions are most urgently needed here?
100%. So this is one of those things. And when I was doing my master's on GBV, I began to understand that there is no socioeconomic area. It's not only for the rich, only for the poor, only for the middle class. This is where now GBV is quite universal. Why? Because our women, our female presenting people are vulnerable. So understanding that aspect where there is a male dominance physically, societally, organizedly, already now puts women at a slightly disadvantage. Speaking of other vulnerable humans, right? They are our children, right? Madiba said we have to protect our children at all costs, and that is what we will do. Those who are disabled or otherly abled, again, will depend on someone else. That already opens up for inequality financially, physically, ably, mentally. I saw that a lot in my work in clinical medicine. And as you said, those, again, we don't think about it. Those who are dependent on chronic medication, your diabetics who need insulin, for example, your elderly or your frail who need help, that can be a very stark form of gender-based violence. It's not just the person walking or the woman walking on the street that is at risk. There are now systematic areas now of vulnerable areas or pockets that need focused targeting. This is where I think forensic medicine comes in. We are perfectly placed to give statistics, annual statistics on the female homicide rate and the homicide rates in general. This gives a feedback system to communities and to role players in this. Number one, SAPS, for example. So in my master's, I found that gunshots were the most used method of unaliving women, and I could actually put down to which police station specifically. There was an instant feedback to that police station to be more strict on the gun violence in that area and be aware of the femicide rate in that area. So we need to be aware of the statistics, and we need to give feedback systems back. Where are the problems? What are they? It's a national crisis now. So we are able to mobilize resources. To understand where the resources come from, we need to understand where the problems are happening. Yeah. Which vulnerable populations in which areas?
Mm. No, that's actually so important that you touch on those topics as well, because those really are sometimes the most vulnerable, the ones that don't have their own voices and the ones that are often overlooked. Talking about prevention and policy, now we've seen some progress through policy changes and community initiatives, but there's still a major gap. From your vantage point, what have been the most impactful policies or programs so far? And where do you see the biggest opportunities for further change?
Oh, it's a difficult question to answer. It's almost disheartening I have to think about it. I actually have to think about organizations or safe spaces, or we know of the online organizations, we know of the hotlines. But I think what needs to happen firstly is the conversation. That conversation needs to happen in a safe place. I think a government policies when it comes to crime, etc., is a long journey. It's a long-term goal. It's not going to happen overnight. We have a high crime rate. Women are already at risk because of that. But secondly, we can empower our women or offer safe places for that. So in the area that I worked with, there was a women's forum, a women's group that was run doing fundraisers every month and things like that, that I automatically could see women helping other women, giving advice to other women. But these leaders, so our group leaders, the leaders who are in charge of such organizations or such groups, it could be a church, it could be your local sports club. Those leaders need to be educated about GBV, how to identify the red flags, and what to do about it. Very subtly. They're perfectly placed to be in communities and to perhaps start changing the cultural norms. I've seen in schools, GBV is now being integrated very well into the school system. Children are being used as a voice to be mummies. This is what happened at home. This is what happening around here. To tell daddy to not do this. So again, our children can be involved in organizations or incorporated as well. We need to change the narrative and the conversation from the ground roots to see something happen on top. So we're not excluding the survivors here. Of course, sure, we need you guys to come forward in front, but where are the spaces? So the policies should be in place to establish safe places, but in a community-driven way. You will tell your friend. You're not going to easily tell your doctor easily. You might just tell your friend or that auntie you meet in a group.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think creating the safe space for conversation is so important. And I'm so glad we've embarked on
Yeah.
hashtag claim your status because I think it's really going to
Yeah.
break a few barriers.
Social media, a safe
Yeah,
space.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Lastly, call to action. Many people want to help, but aren't sure where to start, whether they're professional
100%.
survivors or allies. If you could give one piece of
It's a
advice,
lot.
practical step that anyone could take today to support the fight against GBV, what would it be?
So it's something I think I've said in almost every one of the answers is to just be slightly more woke. You know the red flags, you know the statistics, your statuses are purple, you know what is happening. I think just tell someone, speak about it. It could be a simple conversation that, hey, I saw that doctor saying this. Hey, this happened. Hey, did you see that? Hey, another woman has been murdered here. Start the conversation, open your mouth, and speak about it. Our survivors, find a best friend. Find a best friend right now. And as difficult as it is on your own terms, speak about what happened. That one person creates a ripple effect. Our men, go and tell your male best friend how much you love the female in your life, be it a child, be it a mother. Go and find one person to do that. The
Mm,
call to action is to find a best friend and tell them how much you love a woman or a female in your life. That automatically we are starting a different narrative without getting into any broader, crazy, it's overwhelming hashtags and stuff. Tell one person.
yeah, I love that. The simplicity of it, but the power behind that simplicity is so important. But thank you so much once again for joining us
100%.
on the show, Doc.
Thank you for this platform. I really appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. This was MEDIMAGZA The Podcast with our hashtag Claim Your Status GBV campaign for 2026. If today's conversation moved you, remember awareness is just the beginning. And every story, of course, shared, every question asked, and every action taken brings us closer to a safer, more just South Africa. If you are someone you know needs help, or if you know someone that needs help, please reach out to resources we list in our show notes below. And if you want to get involved as a sponsor of a feature or share your story, contact us at medimagza@gmail.com, or of course on our website, medimagza.com. Together we can break the silence, restore dignity, and of course drive real change. One voice, one action, one life at a time. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Thanks so much for joining us.